Well, this is the first show of 2026, and CTO is still on vacation. So it's just the three amigos here. All the M's, the Mandos and the Martys. How are you guys?
Great start to the year. It looks like a bit of a bullish move now. I think we have a good chance of running to 100K at least here.
Yeah, but that will put a lot of people in shambles. All the bears hoping for another bite at 20K and 30K are all over the place. But that's always the same way, Mando. The market always does what you least expect. When the sheep all believe in one direction, it's always the opposite, correct?
Yeah, I think we had the yearly open, which was affecting the that like level of resistance up until last week. So I think that's been the main shift in at least the technical picture. But then it feels as though this move over the weekend for Venezuela, and then potentially also just like people feeling the AI trade a bit more. Like there's been a lot more of a move towards Claude code recently, which I've been seeing, which I think people are getting very bullish around. That sort of impact again of AI directly impacting the economy. I just feel as though the sentiment is we could have a little bit of a run.
Yeah, I mean Q1 in a new year can always be bumpy and volatile. But we're seeing some things, because you didn't have a Q4 that was positive. Maybe Q1 is good. And Mr. Marty Party, did you have a good slide into 2026?
Yeah, everything is great. It's going exactly according to what we predicted. Tax harvesting over, New Year, the optimism is coming back in a little bit. Playing out exactly the Wyckoff, like to the T. Like you said this morning, I think the test of 94 is huge. If we can break through the 94 here, I think, like Mando says, we possible fast run back to 100, which will waken up a lot of people that exited the stables, and we could see, the squeeze we always thought was coming. So,
exactly.
Or if we lose 94, we could come back down and try and clear out all these longs back down to the 87, 88 range. Who knows? But I think the Venezuelan thing is pretty big news. Obviously, I was covering that all weekend on the spaces. So many narratives and angles there. But it's great. New Year 2026 is the big year, guys. I think this is the year for risk on, in my opinion.
Good. Well, let's get through the agenda. We've got a lot of stuff to discuss. It was quite a hectic weekend. A lot of people are upset. A lot of people, especially the Venezuelans, are very happy, except for one guy, Maduro. But let's get into the story because there's a lot of stuff to unpack. And unfortunately, CTO is not with us today, so apologies for him being on the thumb. But I've been speaking about this $93,000 level. We'll pull up a chart in a minute. I'll pull up some charts myself once I get TradingView to work on this computer. But that 93K level is key, and I do believe we need to be above 93K for 3 days to build in a solid base. But first, before we jump in, we have had in Q4 2025 the longest time in Bitcoin's history in extreme fear. That was from September all the way to December. That has never happened in the history of Bitcoin. So, Mando, to you first. Extreme fear as an indicator, do you believe it typically in his history, like as a caveman, when you're in extreme fear, it's normally a signal to buy when there's blood in the streets. But for that extended period of extreme fear that broke all records, what does that mean for where we are right now today in Bitcoin, now that we come out of the extreme fear zone after 3 months in it?
Mando?
He's muted.
Sorry. I think the best time to buy extreme fear is in bull trends. So if on a bullish trend in crypto, we start to dip into something like that, that's a good time to buy. When it can be a bit dangerous is when like the market turns. So if you extend this chart out to back to like the last cycle tops, they've also gone into extreme fear, and then actually it's continued. So I think it really depends on your overall view on the market. They normally mean a bounce for whatever happens. It's really just how sustained that bounce is the important thing here. I think there's some room now for us to do a bit more of a substantial bounce. It doesn't feel like we're going to just go straight down, even if it is a downtrend at the moment. So I think right now, let's just see if we can reclaim 100, I think like 102, you start reclaiming some of these longer term trend indicators on the moving averages. And that would be a very key moment for like a reversal in the long-term trend. So I think that's an obvious time to buy. It's really just how long you hold on to it is really the key, because you can buy extreme fear, and then in a bear market, you kind of you keep on going lower.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, you've got to look at the makeup of fear and greed. I mean, a lot of people don't know how it's made up. The biggest weight, it's weighted based on volatility, market momentum, volume, social media sentiment, Bitcoin dominance, Google trends, and then random surveys. But by far, the biggest weight is volatility. And I think that October 10th volatility scared the shit out of most people and put that fear level down for the longest time in history, because it was the largest liquidation event in history. So it makes sense. But then the second largest weighted thing is market momentum, and we've seen very low volume, obviously, in accumulation. And then obviously social media sentiment. I don't know about you, James and Mando, but over the last months, I've never seen the sentiment as bad in crypto as the last few months. So all of those together, if you look at those three weightings, result in the lowest, fear, the highest fear we've ever seen. But I think it's changing. I think it changes fast. Obviously, the volatility to the other direction. If you get, pumps, then sentiment returns fast, very fast in crypto, and so does volume. And we can see that already volume is increasing. So once again, those fear and greed things, they're useful indicators, but you must look at how they're made up to really understand what's going on, and they can reverse trend very fast.
Yeah, what has me perplexed, because if you look at the year of 2025, it was a 6% red candle. Never happened in history, first of all. And we had a very long period of extreme selling, record selling by long-term holders in the millions of Bitcoin. And somehow the price only fell 6%. And in Q4, that's normally rocket ship moon boot time, extreme fear for the whole period. So it tells me it's as if we had a bear market, but the price just didn't drop. After all that has happened, and now we're knocking on 94K, the price of Bitcoin is up so far over $6,000 year to date, although we're only, 5 days in, 4 days and 4.5 days. But that's pretty impressive, I think. So it's hard for me to be super bearish. And as Mando, I think you said, the rip to 100K could be pretty fast, because there's $6,000 away. That could happen in a day. Also, we had some weird stuff happening over the weekend. We'll get to the SBR stuff in a minute. And I know, Marty, you did some great work on that over the weekend too. But the US president shared an 8-minute video on the best explanation ever of what Bitcoin is. And this guy did it, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. And it is a must watch for anybody who wants to learn about Bitcoin. It basically makes the case perfectly. To you, Mando, first, imagine the head of the ECB sharing an 8-minute video on Bitcoin. Could that ever happen? And how profound is this?
I mean, I've seen this video a few times, so it's done the rounds. It is worth a watch. I think it's more that Bitcoin, like you said, went down last year, and most of the other things that Trump would define economic success on did maybe slightly better, at least in terms of the stock market. So the fact that Bitcoin's gone down is definitely in his purview. He is aware of this. Obviously, his family's involved in this, which is causing some controversy too. But the idea that he's still putting out content like this around Bitcoin tells you that I think he's going to try and get the price higher. He's going to try and get the price higher, and let's see if that works. But it's definitely important for him if he's still tweeting about it.
Marty, anything to add on that? You know that video yourself very well.
Yeah, I wonder if he's still alive, this guy. Anyway, I think this is great. Once again, I think Trump learned the hard way that you have to be very careful with the volatility of crypto and what you say. I think from his election, he created a very bullish narrative. Literally every day there was new bullish regulatory and policy things, and that just drives the speculative market. People longing with all their money. And then we see, once again, crypto is price is mostly dominated by derivative exchanges. So there was that massive liquidation. I think he's learned his lesson. You got to be very careful with this asset class. And so he hasn't really spoken that much about crypto over the last months. If you see, I think it's almost gone to zero. I don't think he's mentioned crypto since the October 10th thing, which is quite interesting. But here you can see he's starting again, and very much timed with sort of a bottom pattern. So yeah, I think it's very connected, James. I mean, I'm still a big believer in the US's strategy using Bitcoin and stable coins to get out of debt, together with gold. Yep. So, I think it's all par and parcel. I think the Venezuela thing was connected. I think it's all connected. And I don't think there's a big coincidence that he's starting to pump crypto again.
Interesting. Very good stuff. So let's get on to another thing. We'll talk about a bit of bank news, because TradFi jumping into the space is big. And this Jamie Dimon guy, sometimes I loosely refer to him as, I won't say the words here, but watch what he does, not what he says type of thing. And he's gone from being the biggest hater of Bitcoin and crypto to now the biggest lover. And he came out on, I think it was on Fox News, as from Bitcoin Teddy, and he said, crypto is better than the current financial system. The experiment phase is over. This is the pivot of the century. So for a guy that runs probably the most powerful bank on the planet, that is a money market bank, which basically distributes cash on behalf of the government, etc., for him to literally, Mando, help us unpack this, put a pin in his golden goose, as it were. Did that blow your mind? It did mine.
He's been turning for the last 12 months, and he's changed what he's been saying to, I always thought that blockchain technology would be useful, but I don't believe in Bitcoin. I think he's still saying that. He still says he doesn't believe in Bitcoin, but he believes in blockchain. But JP Morgan are one of the people that could benefit the most from this. Like if they were to start setting up DEXs and perp DEXs and use this for payments and for various forms of borrowing and lending like this, JP Morgan's one of the biggest financial institutions in the world, if not the biggest. So I think it would be crazy for them to basically not be involved in financial innovation like this.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as, crypto is one of those things where it's the great ignorance curve, right? When you first hear about it, you think it's a scam. And then once you learn about it, you think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? It goes from Larry Fink to Donald Trump, now to Jamie Dimon. He's just at the very end of the curve. Early pioneers like us, technologists, I was in the early 2000s working on blockchain. We've known that this is the future of financial rails since 2008. But these guys, first they see it as a threat and a scam, and then they slowly realize that, wow, with education and a little bit of understanding, who benefits the most from crypto rails? The government, the banks. Their efficiencies are mind-blowing. The money velocity increases GDP. These are monetary policy tools. These are new tools, if you want to say. So I don't see it as I'm not surprised that Jamie Dimon came around. It just goes to prove JP Morgan, backed most of the world wars. This is the largest bank in the world, pretty much, like you said, with ties directly to the US government. This is basically just rubber stamping crypto as, I believe, the financial rail, and tokenization is the new tool for the economy going into the next 100 years. That's how I see it. And to me, this is just Jamie Dimon giving that the rubber stamp to other banks. Yep.
And I can't. Well, you're a technologist, Marty, and Mando. You know how TradFi operates, and they're running 50-year-old legacy systems made up of COBOL and stuff. Mm-hmm. Do they just want to put a pin in that old stuff, Marty?
Yeah, I mean, the inefficiencies. Well, first of all, understand that the beauty of blockchain is that it's outsourced, so there's no expense in maintaining it for an institution or the government. It's open source, public domain. So the people of the world, the engineers of the world, are doing all of the work. There's no cost associated with it. Plus, there's no single point of failure, so you don't have to worry. Right now, every bank account in the world is run on a mainframe at the Federal Reserve of the USA. Every bank account in the world. Think about that for a second. From sovereign banks all the way down to institutional banks, all the way down to retail bank accounts all over the world. So think about the weight, expense, fear. I mean, even Jerome Powell said it. He said, somebody asked him the question in a FOMC, what keeps you up at night? And he said, what keeps him up at night is an attack on that central banking system. From quantum, from AI. And this is the solution. This is the greatest defense against these kinds of attacks, single points of failure in history. So obviously it's the solution.
I want to double tap into that, Marty. That's a brilliant point, because a lot of people are worried about, quantum's going to bust Bitcoin. There's nothing more secure on the planet than Bitcoin. I mean, it's easier to hack into the Pentagon than get into Bitcoin in terms of brute force. And you can imagine how vulnerable the banking systems are with 50-year-old COBOL, and the healthcare systems and the government systems and the military systems. That's an excellent point. They probably know they need something more secure and safe as they go forward. Let's rip through this before we get to a chart. I do have a chart. We have this one. Bank of America officially begins recommending that clients invest up to 4% of their portfolio in Bitcoin and crypto. But they're just, in full disclosure, they're just doing it for their high net worth customers, which is all the money anyway in the bank, which is trillions of dollars. That is big. We've heard that before, but today is the day it begins. And then we have Vanguard pivoting as well. Everybody's pivoting.
PwC, did you see PwC? To me, that's even bigger.
What'd they say?
PwC is now also green stamped crypto and stablecoin integration for their clients. So that's the big five. I mean, these are between Deloitte, PwC, Arthur Andersen, they pretty much control every institutional computer system in the world, all financial, all reporting, and now they're also going on the rail. So
that's super interesting, because they're auditors, they're accountants, and they're giving financial advice and recommending crypto.
Well, once again, like I said, who benefits the most from self-audits in technology, financial technology? Auditors.
Yeah.
Banks. They're the greatest beneficiary. Their efficiencies go up a magnitude. So they can get rid of half of their staff. They can make money for the shareholders. So there we go. We go up the curve. Everyone benefits from this rail. There we go.
Well, let's look a little bit at this actual chart now. Let me remove this and add this. This is it's a trend chart for the Bitcoin price. And it's on a loose setting, and it has a back test, etc. But the point of this chart is, on a miraculous date, for those people who enjoy TA out there, the 10th of October, 2025, is when this chart immediately reversed and went down. The trend has been down since this late in the day on the 2nd of December, and it turned positive for the first time in 3 months, over 3 months, which is very bizarre. And this basically filters out all the noise and tells you exactly what's happening. We've seen a dramatic trend change in the price of Bitcoin, which for me is a very bullish signal. We can pull up optimized trends and loose trends and tight trends and look at all the different ranges. But this is kind of interesting to me, Mando. This basically rubber stamps the term breakout from a technical analysis perspective. Pinch me. Tell me I'm not dreaming, or am I dreaming?
There's a lot of shorter term or medium term technical indicators that are showing that we've formed some form of a bottom, or that we've turned to the uptrend. So we had that third attempt at 80K before New Year's. And then now post New Year's, it looks like we've rallied in the last couple of days, and then we're rallying out of it. So I do think this looks like a reversal. Whether it's a mini one or a major one, it's unclear, but it does feel as though we've got a good shot, in my opinion, to get over 100K. Interestingly, like the rally in altcoins was led by meme coins as well, which we haven't seen for a long time. Like meme coins have been dead, and yet things like Pepe were up 70% this week. So there's clearly some risk sentiment returning, which wasn't there before. The L1s are rallying, but really it's been these stranger altcoins that are leading it.
Yeah, in fact, Ethereum and Solana broke their 50-day moving average, which a lot of people are saying once you break down below the 50 DMA, that's a negative sign. But now they're up above it again, which supports your thesis, Mando, too.
Yeah.
Signs of life.
There's signs of life. Like I said, these are like 50-day moving averages are like shorter term. It's not like it's 50-week or 200-day or something like that. These are like, okay, we've got to bounce here. Let's see if we can sustain it. Obviously, stocks still going higher. Gold looks like it's pushing back towards all-time high again. Like the macro picture remains strong. What you said there was interesting. Like I think if without the ETFs and all the inflows from the DATs, I do think we'd have had a much worse 2020 end to 2025. We only dropped 6% on the year, and let's see what the DATs, maybe not the DAT trade, but let's see what the ETFs do to start this year.
Yeah.
So that'd be very interesting to see what they do.
And it's I got to double tap into that as well, Mando. You've opened up a Pandora's box. Since the big profit taking happened over the last 12 to 15 months, the first time in circa November 2024, the long-term holders have either sold 7 million Bitcoin or rotated part of their 7 million Bitcoin into ETF funds. We know a lot of, OG Bitcoiners did that for security reasons, for their progeny, for their family, etc., for $5 wrench attacks. And maybe they moved to ETFs, maybe they pivoted to AI. We're not sure. But the key point is all of that dumpage, record high dumpage by a huge amount, was absorbed into DATs, was absorbed into ETFs, and there's a whole bunch of what are called shark wallets, the 1,000 plus Bitcoin holders, an explosion in those wallets. Marty, what do you think of all of this? Are you seeing signs of life here?
Yeah, I'm a Wyckoff guy, so I believe that the market is controlled by institutional investors, large participants. It has very little to do with retail. And they created a distribution where these large players lock in their profits, they sell their assets incrementally, they look for lower prices, they look to accumulate more of the asset. It's about supply and demand. They want more of the supply. And so they create that moment, and usually everyone jumps in. The technical traders sell because they think, oh, this has crossed this. People that were looking to sell because now that's liquid enough to sell. We had all the selling. People who are going to sell are going to sell. The price dumps down, you get the markdown. That's where supply exceeds demand. You get that decline, reach new lows, and then it's about the accumulation pattern. So the institutions start accumulating. They do a couple of tests. Obviously, we're looking for the spring. I mean, if you look at a Wyckoff accumulation, it's all about the spring.
Sorry to cut you off there. We just hit 94,000. I had an alert
about
trading view.
We're on 94.
Back to your Wyckoff. Tell us about this Wyckoff, because this tells me we have a dip incoming.
Well, it's not a guarantee. Okay, Wyckoff does not tell you exactly what's going to happen. It tells you what is the mentality, the intention of the accumulators, of the larger of the people controlling the market. What is their intention? I mean, in this case, their intention was to accumulate. We know that. We've got record accumulation by whales, ETF flows, new whales, sharks. People have been buying the dip like mad. The only people that don't buy the dip are retail because they're in fear. On purpose. It's created that way to create fear. Anyway, so these institutional investors are now building a cause. So they're trying to build a cause for the uptrend. That's this accumulation we just had right now. And it usually ends with what's called a spring. I always tell people, watch for the spring. As a trader, the spring is the ultimate entry, right? If you're a leverage trader, if you can catch the spring, that's usually your biggest trade of the year. And that is a crucial junction. That's where these major players test the support level. So they want to confirm that it's time already to end the accumulation phase. And, they will temporarily dip below the support levels to try and create like a bear trap, a false breakout. And the objective is to force the retail traders once again to sell out of panic and to once again get even cheaper prices. But it doesn't necessarily have to happen. Like you said, if we can break these resistance levels at 94 and hold them, then the technical traders get back in.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you don't see that, and we see the markup.
Yeah,
and,
that's
the typical V-shape recovery. Correct.
That's the whole thing. Don't buy the bottom, but wait until you're completely certain that the recovery is on, and that's exactly when the money comes back.
As a good trader, you should be prepared for both scenarios. Keep telling people that you need to keep control. You need to have dry powder ready, or some kind of an asset allocation under leverage ready for a spring moment, for a flush below level to clear the longs. Or you need to already have been in. I'm in 7 out of 10 units right now. Spot. I'm already back in. So from the 126 exit. So you have to trade. You have to be if you want to trade, you have to be a trader. Keep telling people that. They all think they're traders. They don't understand trading. Trading is not all in, okay, ever, and it's to prepare for all scenarios. And if you're not prepared for all sorts of scenarios, you'll never be successful. And because these large institutional players are using these wipe-offs, let me tell you, these things have been fine-tuned to create maximum pain on the market. And if you're not ready for that, you will suffer.
Exactly. The markets are designed to wreck your head. Don't let the markets wreck your head. So let's go on to this story. Mando, to you first. Venezuela, the minute it happened, I tweeted, well, you know what they should do? They should copy El Salvador and set up an SBR, maybe have the US or some group sell their oil and take payment in Bitcoin form, and then help the nation recover and the people recover, akin to El Salvador. Then, a day later, we learned they have a 600,000 Bitcoin bag, maybe 650, give or take. And there's a lot of chatter out there regarding, hang on, could the US government seize this Bitcoin? Coincidentally, if they did, and it's 650K, that takes them exactly to the million Bitcoin target that the US government has, which is bizarre. Now, or would they transfer it? Obviously, if there's a huge amount of Bitcoin like that, we're talking $50-60 billion worth of Bitcoin, it will have some very secure cold storage. And this fellow here, his name is, I think, Alex Saab, if I got that right, he controls the keys. The question is, can they unlock the keys? We saw that, whatever, the pig farming scandal out of Vietnam or whatever, the US managed to confiscate the Bitcoin. Marty, to you first. You were very active on this over the weekend, and I think the whole internet was abuzz about this. Tell us what you know.
Well, I mean, let's just go back to basics. I mean, the narrative has been for several months on these shows, at least 3 or 4 of them. I mean, telling you that, part of the exits and selling pressure from the top was the fact that sovereign regulatory regime has accelerated to try and cleanse, I call it the purge, the crypto industry, which means, cracking down on cartels, people that, violate OFAC sanctions using crypto, criminals who have used crypto because they thought they could get away with it for the longest time. Well, they're getting cracked down. And, the Mexican cartel, you think Schaumbaum was a coincidence? All of this stuff. This is just the same thing. Madero was just another cartel running a country and bypassing sanctions using crypto. And he had amassed a massive fortune. I mean, he's been doing this for years, pumping oil and selling it for Tether and buying Bitcoin at low prices. And I mean, I had my estimates around 500,000. I was quite surprised to see the 600,000 to 660,000 number, because just as you said, that rounds it up to Senator Loomis's Senate draft of 1 million almost exactly, which is just too much of a coincidence to ignore. But, this is just another act of policing. For the first time in history, we've got crypto policing. And this is how it looks. This is how it manifests. We're going to see a lot of seizures, budget neutral means by sovereign countries to get their hands on Bitcoin. And this is probably the reason that they've been looking at Venezuela from the beginning. I mean, yes, it's the number 1 oil under the ground country in the world, 330 billion barrels sitting under the ground. Yes, that's true. And that's also bullish for Bitcoin. But the 600,000 Bitcoin, I believe, was a major intention for this attack on Venezuela.
And just for the audience to know, we do not condone theft or anything else, but there is some history behind this. The U.S. were the ones that developed the Venezuelan oil industry. They discovered the oil. They built out the mining drilling facilities, the refining, etc. That was all, the predecessor to Exxon, I think it's U.S. Oil or something, did all that. They invested billions. So it's not like Venezuela did that. And I think in 1976 or 78, they basically closed down to the rest of the world under Hugo Chavez. Mando, tell us, what do you think of this interesting development over the weekend? Hang on. I think boom.
I don't have a strong view on the Bitcoin holdings or whether that was the reason for the invasion. I think it's Yeah, who knows at this stage? That bit of it. I do think that it's,
I'll interrupt you there because the reason for the invasion was very clear, and they warned him for years. Even the Biden administration warned him to
Yeah,
stop.
I mean, it
stop sending drugs to the U.S. Stop.
wasn't really an
doing human
invasion. It was
trafficking.
a policing arrest. They basically went in and arrested him and his wife and
Yeah.
extradited him to the US to court. I mean, it's just a criminal thing. These are just
Yeah.
criminal.
Okay, sorry, Mando.
Go ahead.
yeah. Look, I think they arrested him, like you said, because they felt that they'd helped develop those oil fields, and then they'd lost control. Kind of similar to what happened in Panama many decades ago as well. But it feels as though this is a change in, maybe not a change, but a return to a stronger US foreign policy with regards to their interests. It feels as though even after this, Trump has come out and said, look, we want Greenland. Any other of the South or Central American countries need a warning. This is one. He mentioned like Colombia, he mentioned Mexico, he mentioned a few different other ones. I think this is, I would say this is bullish for global markets. Like, the reason why this is bullish is because the AI trade is obviously going to need a ton of energy. And there was some questions about whether they would get that from Canada. It now feels as though Venezuela would be an obvious option to kind of increase that. And then who knows with like some of these other countries, if they will now help the US a little bit more as well. So I do think this was seen as bullish and will help maybe sustain US hegemony at the moment. Whether the reasons for it are justified or not, or for this Bitcoin thing, I don't know. Like, it was interesting to see Bitcoin rally at the same sort of time. Whether I know that, you know, crypto and stablecoins are massive in Venezuela just because the local currency was, you know, doing terribly. And I'm sure there is a lot of crypto there. I don't know how much of it was centrally controlled, and I don't know if the US then has access to it like this. Like we've seen with the big pig butchering scams, that, you know, the arm of the FBI is clearly pretty long. And if they feel like the US has somehow been involved in and should have a claim about that maybe they will try and make a move for local crypto holdings, which I think would be, again, seen as maybe partially bullish.
Yeah.
I mean, James, the evidence we have to support this, that's been my evidence since 2019 when I started to look into this, was Madero was doing gold swaps. So basically, they were mining gold. They have a lot of gold, $2 to $3 billion worth of gold. It was the Orinoco mining arc between 2018 and 2020, and they converted to Bitcoin. And Bitcoin at that time was $5,000 a Bitcoin. So if you do that math, I remember doing the math: $2 to $3 billion worth of gold into $5,000 Bitcoin is roughly 400,000 Bitcoin. So my number was always around 400,000 Bitcoin. And then I knew that they were doing Petra, you know, that Petra crypto they started to shut down. And that accounted for, I believe, around, I don't know, another couple tens of billions of Tether. So if you put it together, you get that number. So there is actually some verifiable evidence. This is not just complete, silver hat stuff. This is based on actual things that happened that went under the news narratives because no one cared. But we knew that definitely Venezuela was sitting on hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin. So it's not just speculative at this point.
No. And I've been saying for years, it defies logic that countries, nations are selling black gold for fiat. It's illogical. You should be selling a hard asset for a hard asset, black gold for digital gold. And it's just... maybe I think Russia might be going down that path, and maybe some other nations, but it's much easier as well to skirt sanctions, which is a big part of this. Anyway, let's move on. The people get bored with this stuff. One of the concerns people have right now, they got very spooked after 10/10, and a lot of people out there in the market, Mando, are sidelined in cash. And this is, people can sometimes get trapped in a bad position or get trapped in a bunch of cash when the market runs away. Now, my thesis, there goes 94K again, Bitcoin. My thesis is that there typically is a Q1 dip. Like it can be a mini black swan or something. But then at the same time, we've got interest rate cuts. We've got money printing happening globally. Will we get that dip? Will there be an opportunity for people who are sidelined in cash to deploy into either crypto or AI stocks or whatever else? It's a tough one.
There's always a dip, even if
Yep.
it's just euphoria based, and there's like a blow off top, and then it dips. Macro, we've said this for kind of since the back end of last year. Like this, we should be seeing a very, very strong picture here, particularly with a new Fed chair coming in, who's likely going to be wanting to cut rates. It feels as though we're going to enter like just a stronger period here for monetary policy. Fiscal policy, who knows? Like maybe we see a bit more of a wobble in some of these Asian economies, particularly like Japan and maybe even China, but it still feels like money printing is going to be the option there too. So the perplexing thing last year was really just crypto actually decoupling from those trends. That would be the only worry for crypto in this year, is that like we don't get a recoupling and back towards those sort of trends, and you can think of various different like black swans that could happen within crypto that could be bearish, but on a macro standpoint, I don't really see one other than China invading Taiwan. You're muted, James.
That would be shooting themselves in the foot if they did that. And the Chinese, first and foremost, a lot of people call it a communist country, but the Chinese are the most capitalistic people you'll ever come across. They love making money. So forget socialism and communism for China. It's not the way they think. They'd rather wait 20 years for the right time to get Taiwan back than disrupt their golden goose, which is what's going on now. But if that does happen, there's a whole bunch of problems that are out there. So, Marty, what would you advise to somebody? And that was good feedback from Mando regarding the people getting sidelined into a bunch of cash. And Mando is so perfectly right. There's always a trade to be had. What I like to do is, have a target of say 10 or 12 targets and build layers and traps. And I got IA trade alerts on TradingView all over the place. One of them hit this morning, actually. So what would you advise?
I don't think there's going to, well, first of all, the current sovereign debt complex relies on inflation. If there's no inflation, then the spiral collapses and we see a global depression of defaulting sovereign debt. So inflation we have to have inflation. They have to print money. They have no choice. If you watch the latest Tucker Carlson interview with that banker guy, he explains, I've never heard it explained so well, exactly what's keeping the boat afloat. So I don't think we're going to see any significant pullbacks in the short term. My group's speculation has always been towards the end of the year, we might see a pullback on the stock market. But for crypto specifically, I think we've just seen a pullback really to accumulate for institutions, because this market structure bill is one of the most largest things ever in the history of monetary plumbing in history. Just understand, this is coming in January, the greatest crypto bill of all time, which is going to change everything. And it's going to rubber stamp crypto, and you're going to get all these institutions coming in. I think it's going to be a massive crypto jubilee. That's my theory for the first at least 2 or 3 quarters of this year. I think together with liquidity, we're going to see the catch-up trade of a lifetime on crypto. I truly believe that. As far as other things go, like Mando said, I think definitely, well, there are 2 sides to the story. Some people think then there's a narrative that it's the US versus China, and other people think that it's actually a global leadership, and they're all working together to try and get out of this mess created from the world wars, right? So they might be working together, they might not be, who knows? But at the end of the day, I think AI is seen as the solution, technology is seen as the solution. We saw silver go up, we saw gold go up. I think at the end of the day, we're going into a new market structure, and the market structure relies on money printing. Like Lynn Holden says, the train can't stop. I just don't see it stopping. It can't stop. Yep. So if you're sitting in cash, it could be quite a crippling experience going into the first 3 quarters of this year, I think. You're going to feel the FOMO like you've never felt before.
And then we know as well, historically, this is a midterm election for the U.S., and that has a big impact on the S&P 500. And it
James, the only
goes up.
next one to me is obviously the Trump tariff ruling, which is expected around January 15th. And obviously the re-indexing. But the Trump tariff ruling is a massive thing. I mean, Trump already said on TV last night, he expects to have no more IRS if tariffs go the way they are. I mean, think about that politically. That is very powerful. to have an external revenue service and not an internal revenue service. And that relies on tariffs. But, the opposition are fighting him in the Supreme Court, and they will rule. Scott Bessent has been very clear it's not a black and white decision. It's not going to be return all the money and no tariffs or gung-ho tariff, whatever you want. There'll be, negotiations and some kind of a meet in the middle conclusion from the Supreme Court. But ultimately, I think a lot of large money are waiting on that answer. And if it goes Trump's way, I expect to see a melt up on all markets.
It's interesting you mentioned January 15th. That's also the date for the MSCI decision,
Correct.
allegedly. Now, Manda, this is interesting for you. There's a lot of theory that Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, etc., wanted to try and control Bitcoin. Therefore, they wanted to take some of the power and steam away from MicroStrategy. And one of the ways to do that is, of course, make the stock not marginable to the extent it was before. Somebody entered a huge amount of put positions. What happened there? And at the same time, too, they could be delisted from the MSCI, which is the Morgan Stanley Global Index. Now, my theory is, why would they do that? It's a $60 billion asset that has a huge amount of upside with Bitcoin. And for an index to do well, they need to show good results. That's how people buy into these ETFs and indexes. Would they be shooting themselves in the foot, or you think it's going to happen? Polymarket says 70% chance it could happen. Got to mute again.
Polymarket's generally pretty good, so they must have I would almost trust that more than anything. Whether I think this shoots them in the foot or not, they've clearly had an issue recently where a lot of NASDAQ firms were being repurposed as treasury companies, and maybe there was just an idea that you need to put a stop to this, and this sort of gamesmanship of old vehicles has to stop. So I think it's more a question about that rather than whether you believe in MicroStrategy or not. Maybe they just want to they want to put a line in the sand and say no one can do this sort of thing in the future with digital assets. I don't have a strong view on MicroStrategy as a company. I think I'd still prefer to own Bitcoin if it goes to 200K. But at the same time, I do think that this is, it's unneeded. I don't think MicroStrategy is necessarily hurting the MSCI index.
No, exactly. It's an interesting one. Marty, any take on this one? Because it would be silly, in my opinion, to succumb to the pressure from the TradFi banks that are trying to, as we said at the beginning, trying to stack as much Bitcoin as they can on the cheap. And you see that with the sharks out there.
Yeah, I think that the January 15th ruling is a nothing burger, in my opinion. I think it's already priced in.
I do too.
It could go the other way, just like the Trump thing. It could go the other way. If Bitcoin continues to rally, they may want it desperately to be in the index again. It's price makes narrative. So it could be a screaming buy if Bitcoin approaches back to 100,000 right now, and it could be around that January 15 date. So it's all in flux, in my opinion.
Yeah, good stuff. There is another thing that people want to know about is AI agents and crypto are beginning to converge. And there is a world where I believe is one of my 2026 forecasts that AI agents will not only be paying with crypto to secure things like tokens, but also negotiate on the behalf of whoever they're working for. Manda, it seems far-fetched, but tell us, do you believe, we obviously do all believe in the convergence between AI and crypto, but how are you playing it? I hear Near Protocol has a lot of exposure there, Solana as well. There's some tokens out there that consider themselves AI plays, but really they're all smoke and mirrors. What do you think?
So people have been getting very, very bullish again on this over the last month because Claude released a new version of its Opus model, and you can download their Claude code terminal. And if you go onto Twitter or X and you see, this is half the timeline at the moment. So people spinning up businesses. It's slightly different than your interaction with an LLM, where it's like an encyclopedia. You essentially download the terminal and then it gets access to your computer. So, and it has the same auth as you would have if you log into like your Chrome. So like if you have your login already set in for all these websites, it can just go in and operate through them. So for example, for the last week, I've been experimenting with the newsletter I do and be like, hey, can you get to all the different data sources in one place for me? And it's been very good at that. And in the past, I've never been able to I've tried to test out with agents and it's not really worked out, but this new Claude model is very good and very easy to use. So I would recommend it anyone right now to go test it out. I think you have to have the higher levels of Claude. You have to pay for it on a monthly basis. But then after that, people are spinning up businesses around this website very, very quickly. It's become very, very interesting. Crypto, I haven't actually used it for, so I haven't used it for trading. But you can imagine the next stage of this would be, trading, payments, all that sort of stuff. And yes, I can imagine that crypto will be the easiest use for it. Whether it's like something specific to crypto, like you just said, like Near, I don't know. At the moment, I'm seeing 90% of my timeline is talking about Claude. It's not talking about necessarily the blockchains that they're using it on. So I don't know if that will be like completely agnostic, or maybe the Claude models will work better with different chains. But right now, I would say that everyone should just go test it out. It's become the new thing to do, for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. For a lot of last year, there was a lot of chatter that you were able to spin up the equivalent of a Bloomberg terminal, which costs $30,000 a year or something like that, using AI. Is this something that you see happening too? And I wish Bloomberg was public so we could short it, but unfortunately, it's a private company because they're dead. They're sitting as toast. What do you think of that thought, Amanda?
If you type in Claude vibe coding into X, you'll see what people are doing. Like there is thousands of different things that people are doing. Often it's about automation of their own life, but it can be extended into businesses. And I saw something the other day was like that there's been thousands of payment gateways added onto Claude-made websites, and even in the last week. So this is something that's happening right now. I think it's become very big over the last 3-4 weeks, maybe over the holiday period. You probably missed it. If you're coming back into for January, like it's something to go see.
Yeah, Marty, as a technologist, you buying into this?
I think. I mean, like Brian Armstrong said, I think agentic finance. That's the word. Agentic finance is the meeting between agentic AI and crypto. Basically, I think it's going to be one of the biggest narratives going into the next few years. It's not just about humans using AI for financial, trading and things. It's about being able to deploy AI agents that earn their own living. They're businesses. They become small businesses. It's an entire disruption to the business model. You can create an entire business with an agent that interacts with a wallet. Now, the biggest, right? People have no idea. And obviously, the IRS and the government, they're going. This is part of market structure and DeFi is to try and understand how the hell they're going to regulate that. But anyway, I think that the leading technologies here will be the fast layer ones. So I don't want to toot my own horn again, but I think Solana and Sui lead the way. Sui is already deeply in partnership with Google, late 2025, to do the Google's agentic payment protocol. It's called AP2, to enable AI agents to conduct like secure financial transactions. And Solana's on the X4 tip. They're all far ahead in doing this because they have the speed and the scalability. And it has to settle on an L1. And so I think that it's going to be a massive thing, way bigger than you realize. And yes, Claude, Grok, Gemini all have that, it's like that B protocol launched, I think it was last month. It's the first agentic wallet and protocol, things like that. I think it was on Sui. This is happening. And I think people, if you want to trade it, you want to be in the AI, obviously stocks, but you want to be in these emerging L1s that can support that kind of speed, scalability, and have radical API and layering, technical layering and libraries and projects that are already way ahead. They've already been building for this. This is not new to them.
It's incredible what's happening. In fact, over the weekend, we had somebody like Amando spinning up an AI agent to track pizza deliveries to the Pentagon. And then they took that data and said, something's going to go down here. And then they placed $40,000 or $30,000 on a would Maduro be taken into custody before the end of the month. And he made 436 grand in hours. that was basically arbitrage, spotting hidden info like pizza delivery, and turning that into the fog of war. Mando, did you hear about that story?
I think prediction markets and this sort of like I don't know, private information sets are very like they're very interesting to look at this sort of stage. Like you can really get an edge, I think, in understanding what's going on by looking at those. I mean, hedge funds use these sort of private information sets for a long time. They'll pay for them. That's why often during COVID they did better than others, because they were like paying for that. But yeah, I'm super interested in this in now as a field. Like I think there is a world here where you can actually systematically predict the world better with the way that prediction markets are coming together. And it's something that I'm kind of exploring myself. You know, the idea of almost like the predictive news. You know, like what are the things that you predict will happen over the next week? Because I think the way that we consume information is often ex post, right? Like it's like, oh, okay, this happened, and you read the news about it. Whereas it'd be good to kind of almost have those predictions coming in. There's enough information sets out there right now that you can get a better sense of what is happening live or could happen, is more likely to happen live. So,
I mean,
what?
Yeah, 100%. Mando, did you see today Polymarket and Parcel announced integration, so you can now bet on
real
the cost
estate
of housing in each city in the USA.
Yeah, you know, everybody's shorting New York City right now. There was a lady that came on Twitter and she said, you know, this whole collectivism stuff is that if you're a white person and you own real estate, there's going to be some change coming from you, which is just craziness. I mean, the stuff that's happening in the world is bizarre. But getting back to one thing I do want to mention, though, as well, that alpha edge, Mando, you mentioned the speed of alpha. When the Pentagon was doing all of these activities, do you know what screen they had up in the background? It was Twitter. They were monitoring Twitter for live feeds from the ground of things like missiles firing and stuff, not their own feeds. They're watching X. And that speed of dissemination of live on the ground information from millions of reporters around the world is stunning. Tie that into...
And then people are betting on it, right?
Exactly,
so, yeah,
exactly. Live.
If you can have something... This is basically what I'm trying to change the way that I consume information about, is like really looking forward looking. So like, what are the trends on things on these sort of prediction markets alongside X? You get a better sense of like what is actually happening or about to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And there's one other thing. You did mention L1s. This came out from Masari. They had a big year-end report, but they analyzed the top crypto assets from the bottom of the bear, which that was December 1st, I think, 2022. And they said only 2 assets actually beat crypto. And I know we get a lot of hard time about those Solana's crap and everything else. But by the way, nothing beats Solana. Solana from the bottom of the bear is still, even though it's beaten to death right now, it was up 888%. And the number 2 asset was XRP, which still befuddles me, up 400%. So those were the only 2 assets that actually beat Bitcoin since the bottom of the bear. So I thought that was an interesting angle. Marty, to you first. You know, Solana gets a lot of hate, but the results maybe say something different.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I just tell people, if you don't use something, then don't invest in it. So you ask an XRP person, so have you sent anybody XRP in the last year? No, they don't use it. It's an unused thing, and it has 1.7 TPS. It's got 1.7 users per second. So it's speculation as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Solana, on the other hand, is doing over 1 million transactions every hour between wallets. It's being used. I use it every day. I've been using it for 3 years for everything. I have a Apple Pay, a stablecoin Solana app, and I use Solana, and I pay people in Solana, and I earn in Solana. It's being used. It's the only chain that's being used. Everything else is speculation, in my opinion. And the market structure thing will change all of this. And I don't think it's been beaten up. I just think it's been accumulated. I remember the 2 major events in Solana's history that nobody's really talks about or wants to talk about because it's quite frightening, but it's coming to an end. And that is that Solana was used primarily to pay off the FTX creditors. So, you know, the judge ordered it by law that all of the FTX and all of the Alameda stake in Solana had to be slowly sold at market value to pay creditors. And and that's nearly ending.
Yeah.
It's winding down. I think the last big one was in late December, and going into this year, it's significantly lower. Plus, inflation was always a thing. To build a network, you need inflation, but I think that's also coming to an end. And now there's a massive Galaxy proposal to reduce inflation by half. That's ending, and then you've got the ETFs. They come online, and ETFs don't buy the top; they make a bottom. And so you can see it very clearly in the chart. So I think all eyes on Solana for a massive breakout. Just a matter of time.
And it's above the 50-day moving average right now. So it has recovered quite a bit over the past, year to date, in the last 5 days. Another thing that's, speaking of convergence between our themes, crypto and AI, Bitcoin miners is a cool thing called the mullet strategy. The Bitcoin miners are expert at getting access to cheap energy, spinning up data centers, wiring it all together, and mining Bitcoin. But now they have this thing called the mullet strategy. There are AI firms, hyperscalers, etc., that are absolutely desperate for energy. In fact, Hut 8, which always ranked poorly in my minor analysis, they did a huge deal worth billions with hyperscalers, probably by virtue of the fact that I think the Trump sons are involved with Bitcoin mining, etc. Maybe that had helped it. But this is super interesting. Bitcoin miners, I know you guys don't play those at all, but could it be interesting? Because on the one hand, they can mine for Bitcoin, and if the demand for energy becomes so high, they can turn that off and then deploy a couple of NVIDIA GPUs or TPUs from Broadcom on their behalf of clients. Mando, energy.
Yeah, look, they seem like they have a hedge essentially against crypto at the moment, which is why they've been interesting, and you've seen a lot of consolidation in them. So I think the mining space is actually pretty interesting right now. Do I like them more than hyperscalers? I still think the hyperscalers are more interesting, if I'm honest. Like, I still think Google, Tesla, Amazon, I think those are very interesting stories still. So,
and I believe they're all going to cut each other's throats, just like Bitcoin miners typically do too, because it'll be a race to the bottom. The one that'll win will have the most coherent compute, and we know who does that, so we won't talk about that. There is another angle too, speaking of AI, Marty. NVIDIA, the US government is opening up China to NVIDIA GPUs, and ByteDance, allegedly, from Mario here, is going to buy $14 billion worth of them. People talk about AI being a bubble, but literally this is one firm ready to deploy $14 billion in GPUs from NVIDIA. How wild is this?
The train doesn't stop. I think the investments in AI speak themselves. Come to the US, all over the world. Jensen's latest speech was insane. The amount of money they're talking in the trillions. Everybody needs chips, and everybody wants AI, and it's going to power the next generation of the human race, in my opinion. So once again, like I said earlier, the train doesn't stop. I think we're going to see a melt up in these asset classes. And we can see it in gold and silver, which are the backbones of the manufacturing of the components of these things. You see it in the mullet trade. Remember, Bitcoin is one of the greatest data centers in the world. It is a supercomputer. A blockchain is a supercomputer, and not just a mainframe, like the central bank. It's a distributed supercomputer, which relies on a ridiculously fast network, which relies on ridiculously fast CPUs and Moore's law to constantly evolve. And all of that is still literally reaching its adoption curve peak right now. So I think all of this is just going to the moon, honestly, James. I can't see any reason why it wouldn't.
No, it's all about the price of intelligence is going to zero, but in order for that to happen, the investments need to be made in AI. So that's why it's super interesting. And what really has me very interested, we'll try to dig more into it in subsequent shows, is that convergence of AI and crypto. That winners take most. If you can identify early who that winner is, that could be a game changer. Who's working with Claude to make payments and negotiate on behalf of what Mando is building? That is fascinating. A couple of quick questions before we wrap in 2 minutes. One, Fidelity has Solana. I think that's interesting, from $52,000. I wasn't aware of that. But I know they have an ETF, but did they have a private bag as well? Because they've been mining Bitcoin since 2014, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. There was another question that came up regarding people wanting to buy Tesla Leaps. Tesla Leaps are very, very expensive, but if you see a big wick down, then think about strikes around low 400. Not financial advice. and we'll take a couple of very quick questions from anybody here. If anybody has anything, or if I missed any quick questions. And while we're waiting for somebody to pop a few questions up, I think it's so important that Bitcoin's above 93K. If we can stay here for 3 days, so there's always a Tuesday, Wednesday slump, Monday night, Tuesday, Wednesday slump. If we can keep high, if the demand and money flow can come in, will be huge. Also, ETFs had a $500 million day on the first day of the year, which was...
Yeah, Solana ETFs crossed 1.08 billion.
Yep. And it's a much smaller asset than Ethereum. People forget that. It's less than a fifth of the market cap. So let me see. No questions. Now TradFi won't want to use the invention of Satoshi's blockchain. Silver questions. And can you buy Sol with Fidelity in your crypto Roth IRA? I don't know. I don't do IRA.
You can
stuff.
buy the Solana, the Fidelity ETF. Just buy the ETF.
Yeah, exactly. What do you guys think for the week ahead? And by the way, there's a question of oil stocks tokenized. Everything will be tokenized. That's another huge narrative that's going to kick in hard in 2026. Mando, you agree? Tokenization of the world?
I think tokenization is definitely going to take off.
Yeah,
that is 100% going to happen. I'm still skeptical, actually, on whether L1s are going to get the most value from them. As in, like, I think people are going to start valuing them a bit more on TradFi metrics, and that can be a little bit painful. But I do think tokenization, like what JP Morgan just said, they think they can make a lot of money from this. So you're going to see that as a huge, huge trend again this year.
Yeah, and there is another aspect that people forget. Marty, you're well aware of this too, is Alpenglow. The finality of Solana will become the fastest on the planet in 2026. We're talking blink of an eye, 30 milliseconds, if I'm not mistaken. That will also be very important for the tokenization of the world, especially stock markets. Way faster than NASDAQ, which would be critical as well for global trading, which will also become 24/7, 7 days a week. In fact, Robinhood are trying to do, I think they call it 24/5. So soon you'll be able to trade stocks 5 days a week, 24 hours a day. So none of us will get any sleep. Oh, great. That's good.
I mean, people just, one thing I just want to summarize there, just to pigeonhole in there. The valuation fundamentally of a blockchain is, the amount, the TVL, the amount of value on the network. So as, right now it's stablecoin, pretty much US treasuries, debt is tokenized on these blockchains, and the fundamental value of the stake, in other words, the controlling value, what it costs to control and secure the network, goes up based on TVL. With real world assets and tokenization of stock and tokenization of treasuries and tokenizations of debt, all of these things, the TVL is going to skyrocket. This all pigeonholes into market structure. Once market structure passes, the value of tokens on these networks, the ones that are regulated, is going to 100x. Think about it. So the stake will fundamentally be revalued.
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
is the price of these tokens. People get that very mixed up.
Yeah, that's why I have a couple of very quick questions here. Yes, Elon is getting political again. We're seeing, well, in the United States, probably in other countries in the near future, there's been a massive discovery of extreme fraud in literally the hundreds of billions, maybe trillions of dollars for things like daycare centers. Things like healthcare fraud, other types of government scams. The head of Minnesota is probably going to step down, and he's not going to run for re-election because he's a complete fraudster. So Elon was the one who discovered all this with Doge in the first place. Now you got 23-year-old YouTubers discovering fraud, not any of the big media companies. It's just a very interesting time to have. And yet midterms will be interesting. Markets go up in a midterm year, and the subsequent year they go up even more because it's typically a lame duck session. But we have, when I look at the US, you got the left and the right. Both side states are becoming very socialist, which is a problem. There's some change happening. So who knows where it goes? Yes, Elon's becoming political, but he wants the country to survive. Also, piece here, Claude and Hyperliquid. Did you hear about that, Mando? Hyperliquid and Claude building AI trading futures. But more of that will come. I mean, perps. I look forward to the day when you can trade perps on everything, including all things tokenized, whether it be oil or real estate, 24/7, pre-IPO stocks. That's also coming. The crazy stuff coming. People still ask you about Museos, Marty. They're still building?
Yeah, Zeus is still building great. I mean, yeah, it came down a lot. And if you missed the trade at the top, then, you need to learn how to trade.
Yeah.
And hopefully you've learned more since then and when to buy now. Is buying accumulation. This is your time. You lower your costs, you lower your average. But the most important thing I want to tell people once again, because I get this all the time, is when somebody recommends you buy something speculative, you don't go all in. It's a small speculative bag. It should be less than 0.5% of your portfolio. Okay, you don't go all in on some random risky thing. And that goes for all of it. There's Walrus, there's Deep, Walrus, Ica, and Zeus. That's my 4 infrastructure tokens. And the accumulation of all of those is tiny for me. It's a small part of my portfolio. You don't need much of these things. We're looking at hundreds of percents of potential appreciation over the course of the next years towards 2028 to 2030. So you don't need much. So absolutely, this is the time to play. This is the time. You know what the good projects are. Not like you don't know. We've been telling you for a long time what the good projects are. And this is the accumulation phase. Trade like a whale. This is your time to buy when it's down, not when it's up.
And I will warn people as well, be careful of tokenized stocks because you're not really buying the stock. People think, I can get XAI and SpaceX pre-IPO and tokenized. It's not the same thing. So be careful of that. And Aave, I used to trade that back in 2021. Massive TVL. Does this mean it's going to skyrocket? Final question. You guys look at Aave at all? It is probably the most trusted. If I had to borrow against my crypto, I'd probably use Aave, to be honest. No plug here. Don't have any. But interesting.
Have you seen what's happened with Aave this year, though? There's something going on with Aave at the moment. There's a massive fight between the lab and the DAO. Although it is a very, very good protocol, there's a debate about where the value of that protocol lies. So Aave is a great crypto product. Again, this points to sometimes the tokens aren't the best things to own.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's a wrap. We made it to an hour. We had 94K broken. Remember, Bitcoin was at 87K at midnight on I think the 1st of January. So that's a big move. There are signs of life. We got to get through Tuesday, Wednesday, and maybe part of Thursday, the slump days every week. It's the same pattern every single time. It runs Friday afternoon after the stock market closes. Saturday's quiet. Sunday's a fire day. Monday, sometimes it continues. Sometimes it sells off right after the show. Watch that carefully. Thank you, gents, for being here. Don't forget, links below for these legends. Follow them all. You will get extremely interesting perspective from all of them. Mando Minutes newsletter and Marty Party. I subscribe to them both. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Mando. For having us again.
Always.
Follow the Wyckoff people. It's pretty much playing out exactly as we expected. If we break 94, like James says, we could see a V-shaped recovery with a lot of FOMO buying. If we don't and reject, expect a spring down at 84, 85. And that's where you buy. That will be the greatest trade of your life, I believe.
Yeah, that'll be a solid triple bottom, actually, at the 84K level. You might even see me.
And the timing on the Wyckoff is roughly January 16th, which is ironically close to the January 15th deadlines of those
MSCI.
two events.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, legends. You will not find brains or alpha like this anywhere in the crypto space. Thank you all for coming. Have a great week, my friends.
Have a good one, man.
Thank you, mods, too.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.